as a leader, you need to truly think about what your employees are coming to work for. It's not a paycheck anymore. And if you think it is, you absolutely have the wrong idea why people come to work.
Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zac Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today's guest is someone who brings heart and rigor to the people side of business, Heather MacKay. She's the founder and principal consultant of HM Pinnacle Consulting, where she builds high-impact HR infrastructures that don't just support growth, they unlock it. With over 20 years of experience in talent management, compliance, and change leadership, Heather is on a mission to help organizations lead with empathy, integrity, and a people-first strategy without sacrificing performance. In this conversation, we dive into what it really takes to build a healthy workplace culture, how to navigate complex HR challenges while scaling, and what leaders are getting wrong when they talk about fixing culture. Whether you're building a team, leading through change, or just trying to stop burnout from creeping into your organization, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Heather, my friend, welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Zach. That sounded so good. I sound really amazing all of a sudden.
Well, it's probably because you are amazing, but we'll save that discussion for later. Heather, one thing I always like to start with this question because I think it reveals a lot about who someone really is. What does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Oh, wow. So I guess there's a lot to growth. That's a really active word, in my opinion. I think if you would have asked me that even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it would have been a very singular-minded kind of concept. But I think right now, and I don't think it has anything to do with age or anything like that. I think that our mindset has shifted a lot, and growth really is a full, all-encompassing thought pattern now. So when we think growth, or at least I'm going to say most people do, and this is from talking to people in business and also just in work environments. But when we think growth, we are really thinking our personal growth, we're thinking our intellectual growth, we're thinking our physical growth, we're thinking our business and career growth. It's an all-encompassing thought pattern now. It's unique. And the funny thing is that more and more people are expecting that out of their business to provide all of that growth. And I'm noticing that we have to change our mindset in business to provide that a lot more. And that's one of the conversations I'm having a lot more with business owners is what are you providing your employees to provide them with growth? And they start out with I just had this conversation the other day, actually, when I was talking with a new client that is in a government sector. And that is very hard for them to even grasp that concept. But I said, what are you providing for motivation to provide growth? And they said, oh, well, we have a career growth inside the union, right? So you become a maintenance tech 1, 2, 3. And I was like, whoa, you're not going to attract anybody for that, right? And he said, well, you're right. We're struggling to attract people and grow them. We've got people who've been here 40, 50 years and they're retiring out. And we can't find people to come in. And I said, well, that's because all you're offering them is a job, not a career, a job. And I said, so where's the mental health? Where's the camaraderie? Where's the family dynamic? Where's the collaboration, right? People are looking for more in growth than just a job that has a ladder to it anymore.
Yeah. That's a really fascinating and interesting take on so many levels. I mean, so how are you seeing that? I mean, you mentioned that our, somewhat age perception of growth was more singular. It was like focused on those aspects of the business. But now where people are looking for finding growth and fulfillment for all areas of their life, but through the business. So how is that shifting the business landscape in terms of hiring, leadership, management, retention, churn? Could you speak to some of those things? Because I think this is an incredibly, this is an incredibly important conversation for any owner, founder, principal, VP, anybody that's listening right now.
Absolutely. And I think it really struck us hard post-pandemic. So I think that's when people's minds really shifted, and we're noticing it more and more with the generational change. But even the older generations, the post-pandemic really altered where people are like, whoa, I am not 100% job only anymore, right? Because life has changed. And when people were stuck at home, they realized how much life changed and they went, I can do this remote or I can do this hybrid, or I don't really need to give a 9 to 5 job all of me anymore. And so it's really developed a different mindset. And so I'm finding that when I'm instructing leaders or working with them and collaborating, one of the first things I ask them is walk me through what you think your employees are coming to work for, right? What is it that they're coming to work for? And I want to know what their mindset is, because leaders, first and foremost, they need to understand, because I can't teach them if they don't get it themselves, right? So I was working with a company and it made me laugh when we were having this conversation, but I started with them. And the reason they hired me was because I called them out on this. And it happens to be an aerospace company. And anyone who works in manufacturing aerospace is going to understand that one of the reasons I choose this industry has a lot to do with what you said early on. I like to work with broken. That is one of my specialties and HMP specialties. The more broken you are, bring it on. Because those are the groups that really, truly need the help. Now I'm digressing. But so anyway, I was working with this aerospace company, and the first thing one of these leaders said to me is, our employees come into the parking lot and they turn off the car and they get out of their car and they leave half their brain in the car before they walk into the building. And I'm sick and tired of it. I get half a brain when they walk in the building. And I wanted to sit there and say, like, you're the reason. But I was careful. I was very careful because I was like, I could use the business. But what I said to him, I said, why? Why do you think they leave half their brain in the car? What are you doing as a leader that's causing that? And he was so affronted that I said that to him at first, but it challenged him. And that's what I do. I want to challenge leaders to think about it, right? As a leader, you need to truly think about what your employees are coming to work for. It's not a paycheck anymore. And if you think it is, you absolutely have the wrong idea why people come to work. It's really not. They want to balance. They want to know that what they're doing impacts not only the job, the bottom line, their co-workers, their leaders, the environment, the community, but they want to know they have an impact, right? And so that's the most important thing. And that comes from an ability to grow, right? In all areas of their lives. And so you want to really work with leaders to figure out how to help them see that fully. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. And I'm taking notes because there's so much to unpack there. Like there's it, you- that's a brilliant question. And I love, I mean, I know you, so it doesn't surprise me at all that you asked this question. But what's amazing about it is that one, you have the fortitude, the willingness, and also the ability to ask it in a way that encourages people to respond. And there's, it's like, one thing I always told clients or from stage when I was coaching live, I'm like, you guys got to remember, it's not what you say. It's how you say it. If I'm coming from a place of curiosity, and my tonality reflects that, if I'm coming from a place of concern and genuine caring and my tonality reflects that, people are much more likely to be receptive than if it feels like an attack. If it's coming from a place of aggression or disappointment or disgust or whatever the thing is, right? So your communication standards are very high, and I know you're a very effective communicator. But and now I'm starting to digress. The thing that's so curious about what you said is you start with that one fundamental question, and I want to make sure I got it right. It was like, walk me through what you think your employees are coming to work for. And you're right. As you were talking, I started thinking about it. I'm like, yeah. When I've looked at job ads, or I'm in the process of creating one and working with a team or organization, one of the questions I'm always asking is, if I'm looking at comp plans as an example, is like, does the comp plan drive the right behavior? And that's a big motivator, particularly in the sales side of things. But that's one piece. There's everything that we do that from day one onboarding. There's a substantial amount more buy-in if people are just getting a branded t-shirt or jacket and they feel like they're actually physically a part of the organization. But then there's all the stuff that goes beyond that. And I love when I see companies that are doing things like paying for their employees' gym memberships, or even building a gym in the organization if they've got a big enough site. Providing time off or additional time off for having kids. I mean, both the mother and the father. And what a beautiful gift. Giving people permission to take mental health days and building that in, not as a part of their sick day package, but just mental health package. I'm going through some stuff right now and I need a day or two to decompress. It's
Yeah.
that type of foresight, coupled with, and really showcasing that they care and building a culture around that. It's one thing to put those things on paper. It's a whole other thing to follow through on it, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on. But building that culture around it and designing it in a way that encourages people to utilize those resources. I have to imagine that now you get the whole brain versus the half the brain, right? And you get more excitement. And when coupled with an organization that is leading from a place of impact, like why would anybody want to go anywhere else?
Exactly. That's exactly it,
Mhm.
right? If you can figure out why your employees are coming there and why they're choosing to work with you, and you can use that to go ahead and build out what your employees are there for, you won't lose them.
Mhm.
That's the important part, right? And right now, employers need to know that more than anything, right? And it's one of the things that I speak about when I'm doing speaking engagements is the reminder it's not about recruitment, it's about retention because we
Mhm.
are about to hit one of the worst times we've ever hit in the job market. As we have all of our baby boomers getting ready to end their work environment, and we have less people coming into the work environment over the next 20 years, and we're hitting that silver tsunami, we're in trouble. We do not have enough people, and AI is not going to take over the entire world. I don't care what people say. We really need humans, especially in manufacturing, in aerospace, right? You don't have a freaking AI widget that's not going to build an airplane. And the minute they
Mhm.
do start building airplanes with AI, I am not getting on an airplane for a while. And so they need to understand that you have to figure out how to retain people because
Yeah.
you're not going to find them in the market anymore. So
Yeah.
you have to change your mindset about, hey, there's somebody else out there if this person decides they don't want the job anymore. And you have to say instead, what am I not doing to help impact this person to keep them? What is it that they need to stay at here? What am
Yeah.
I doing to help provide growth? And that's not compensation. That's not career path only. What am I doing to help provide growth for these people in the way that they need? What is
Mhm.
it that they want? And
Mhm.
here's the hard part for every employer, and this sucks, but it's true. It's different for every generation. So you can't have a one and done package anymore.
Mhm.
It's not a, hey, I've got really great retirement plans. I've got really great, company lunches. I've got really great, coffee and snacks in the lunchroom, right? You have to think twice and go, okay, what's the dynamics of my work environment? Who am I trying to keep and retain? And then you have to develop out a program. And that's where HR comes in and is really helpful for you because we have to figure out what that looks like for your dynamic and figure out how to maintain it for all of the different types of employees you have.
I hadn't even considered that as a part of the struggle. I mean, you're right, because I mean, my wants, needs, desires are probably very different than somebody in their 20s or versus somebody in their 60s, 20 years either
Yeah.
direction. And, I would imagine that it's probably not as simple as saying, hey, here's a a la carte menu of benefits and you can pick and choose. There's probably legalities where you can't provide something like that, which
You
is,
know what's funny? It's not even that. It's
right.
ironically enough, if you did that, people feel like you don't care about them. Ironically enough, it's not
Oh,
like
yeah.
because
Mm,
you're like, here,
mm-hmm,
just choose what you want.
mm-hmm,
How does that show that I care about you personally? To
mm,
where if I say, hey, you know what, Zach? I want you to have a great wellness plan because
yeah.
I know that that's important. I know that you want snacks in the lunchroom. So we have somebody who comes in every Wednesday and restocks it so you don't have to pay for snacks. And that way you can take a break here and still get your job done, etc. It matters because I'm thinking of you. But if I say, hey, here's a menu, just check off which ones you want. We just have them all.
Yeah.
That's not going to make you feel like I care about you. So
Yeah.
you can't do that. So it's a no-win situation for owners or leaders, right? So you actually have to take the time to figure out what you need and then develop the plan. You can't just go, we'll just do whatever.
That's fascinating. And I've got several questions around this, because this is a great subject. And I mean, I think it will also expand across context and because there's so much that HR involves. And I would love if you would also, in a little bit, we'll spend some time illuminating what's, kind of a nebulous conversation for most people. It's like you and I have talked about before, you know, head of people, HR, human resources, it still has this like, what is that kind of thing? Everybody thinks that I think about it mostly for the hiring and firing parts, but not necessarily everything else that you do, which is a lot. But as it pertains to benefits, um, that is such a eloquently illustrated point. it needs to show that you put thought into it and around the culture and the team that you're working with. So how do you balance? I mean, I have so many questions. How do you balance budget with outcome? Like, because I mean, most people don't have indefinite resources. How do you create something that's quantitative around a qualitative output? Like, we're doing these things. How do we know what kind of an impact it's having on the organization? And I guess what runs in parallel is, if we're providing these things, is there a point where people start to take them for granted? Or do they realize through conversations with other peers and friends, like, whoa, you get all those things, and maybe that's part of the conversation that helps keep that fuel and excitement around it. Like, could you talk a little bit about I guess, some of the nuances as well as the bigger picture simultaneously?
Yeah, so it completely depends upon the organization and the environment. So some of my clients have unions, right? And so in a union environment, it's a lot easier. I'm in the process of getting ready to start contract negotiations for one of my clients. And so it's a lot easier because I can provide on the table, here's what all of these other municipalities are getting for their employees, and here's what we're giving you. So look, we are already offering you more. So it's easier when you're in that kind of an environment because I can get 100% of the data out there because it's public knowledge. And so when you can do that, it's a lot easier. When you don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle because it's not a union environment, then it's a little bit more difficult to be able to say, look, I'm giving you more than you can get somewhere else down the street. In those situations, I'm a big advocate for putting together what I call a total compensation package. And so once or twice a year, I recommend at least at time of performance reviews, end of year, mid-year reviews, whatever you guys do in your organization, is to put together what I call total compensation. So it lists out what your benefits cost. It lists out what your PTO costs. It lists out what the free snacks in the lunchroom. It lists out whatever it is that you guys are offering. It lists it out as a total package that says, here's really what we're investing in you. And I don't say, here's what it costs to have you. Here's what you're getting from us. Here's what we're investing in you. Because that's what it is. It's an investment. And that's how an employer needs to look at it. It's an investment in another person, right? And when you look at it that way, the word investment makes me feel good. As an employee, they're investing in me. That means something, right? And two, as an employer, you're realizing that you're investing in for a product out, right? And so it changes out the dynamic of what it looks like. It doesn't look like, hey, this person's costing me this much money and I'm only getting this much work out of it. But the second thing is you have to then turn around and as an employer, you look at your ROI is retention. It
Mm-hmm.
really is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the longer someone stays with you, truly, the more productivity you get from them because they have knowledge. They have the tribal knowledge. They have the ability to produce faster. The quality of work goes up. The ability for them to collaborate is better. The ability for them to train other people is better, right? So that's where you actually get your ROI from. And
Mm-hmm.
so you look at that and you go, what's your longevity, right? What's your longevity in your organization? That helps dictate whether or not you're getting the bang for the buck.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I mean, we all know, well, I guess I shouldn't say we all know, we never assume. I mean, if you don't know, hiring is one of most expensive investments that we can make in any organization. So we're much better off putting those hard-earned dollars back into our employees so they have a better experience and we reduce churn and get better outputs to begin with. I mean, it's really a win-win-win, but I think so often it's easy to fall in that trap of, to your point, looking at it as an expense when in reality, it's really an investment in your people and what creates that stickiness and keeps them coming back and provides more joy and fulfillment. One thing I'd love to have you expand on, actually two things, and I think they run in tandem a bit. One, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, like illuminating, like, what is HR? Because I don't think people have, and not that we need to get into the nuances, but if you could touch on some of the big categorical things that HR does, because I know in my relationship with you and having worked together, like you expanded my worldview of everything that HR is responsible for. So if you could talk a little bit about what it is and the functions are, that'd be great. And then also the inception point, like when is it that people are required to bring on an HR team? Should they think about implementing HR before, that milestone of you now have to have it legally? And yes, for our listeners, you do have to have HR legally at a certain stage in your business. So be mindful if you're not aware of that. And, what, let's start with those questions. I don't want to get too deep.
Sure. So it's ironic that you just asked, what is HR? So, was it Easter? It must have been Easter, I think. So, my husband happens to work for a flower producing organization. So, he grows the most beautiful plants in his organization. He's a general manager. And so I'm lucky enough that I get plants. So he brought home a bunch of hanging baskets. And so I was giving them out to our neighbors as an Easter gift. And so I walked across the street to this amazing older couple who lives across the street, and he's in his 90s and he's out on this giant piece of, like, I don't know, it was a bulldozer or whatever the heck it was. He shouldn't be out there at 90, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I walked over there to give him this hanging basket for his wife because she wasn't home. And he said, "You're home all the time. Do you no longer work?" And first of all, that's what he said. And I was like, no, I own my own business and I work from home. And he's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I own my own HR consulting firm." And he's like, "What's HR?" And I was like, how do you explain this to a 90-year-old man who's only owned a construction firm by himself his whole life? And he's retired for probably, 40 years now. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, how do I explain HR? And so I started to try and explain what we really do. I was like, we build out infrastructures and we help leaders, to make sure employees are having a really good, healthy work-life balance and, blah, blah, blah. And I'll explain it in better terms in a minute. And he kind of glazed over and looked at me and I go, "We hire and fire people." "Oh, I know what you do."
See? Right.
We're doing
Right to my
HR.
point.
We hire and fire, done. Right? That's
Uh,
how we do.
Classic.
Which is so minimal for HR, right? But
Yes.
that's the average idea of what people think HR is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And originally, a million years ago, when it was a personnel department, that's exactly what HR did.
Mhm.
So HR is so much bigger than that, or it
Yes.
can be. And I have to caveat that because some
Mm-hmm.
companies treat HR just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just there for benefits, payroll, hiring and firing, and that's it. And when when companies do that, I have to I have to strongly remind them that they are missing out on so much that HR can provide them with. And they don't even realize the strategic partner that HR can be. That's what I like to start out saying. That's what HR does. So HR should be the strategic partner at the leadership table. What HR truly provides is an opportunity to bring the people part of the organization to the operations part of the organization and mesh them together,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what HR is there to do. We're able to look at the challenges inside of an organization, whether they're financial challenges, whether they're manpower challenges, whether they're hour challenges, resource challenges, whatever they are. And we're able to look at that and help find solutions with the human resource, right? There are other types of resources every organization has. So human, the people resource, we're able to take that resource and show you how it can help support the financials, right? Is it layoffs? Is it furloughs? Is it reduction? Is it hiring more people in to help offset it, right? Is it promotions? Is it demotions, right? We're able to take that human, that capital resource over here and figure out how to work it over here. Right. Same thing with, okay, we need to produce more product. Great. Does that mean we add another shift? Do we figure out how to alter or redesign or restructure what these people over here are doing to be able to offset that? I worked for a large, not to be named aerospace organization, and that's exactly what we did. It's a small city, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not, a business. It's a small city with
Mm-hmm.
as many employees as you have at any given time, and you want to add another shift. It's not like operations can go, "Hey, we're just going to add another shift. We're just going to take these 20 people and move them on to night shift." Oh no, there's a lot more to it. But you need that human resource, right, to do that. You need to figure out how to move those people. You need to know what the laws are to move those people. How many days notice do you need to give them? Does it change their pay because they're working overnight? Can you work them 12 hours if it's going to be 2 different days? So is that
Mm,
2 different days pay? Is that one day's pay if it goes over midnight, right? So all of those kinds of components people don't think about when it comes to the HR side. So
yeah.
that's the strategic side of HR as well as building out infrastructure. So our job is job descriptions. Our job is compensation structures for those job descriptions. Our job is building out any type of performance management systems. Our job is handbooks and policies. Our job is investigations, making sure that employees have somebody to talk to if there's issues going on. Our job is everything from compliance all the way through to, we don't call it onboarding. We call it new hire experience. That is what we call it at HMP. Because onboarding is a bunch of paperwork you fill out that goes into a computer system so you get paid.
Mhm.
New hire experience, which you already alluded to, Zac, because I know you know it's that way, is the swag. It's
Mhm.
the feeling you get when you start an organization. It's the feeling that someone wants you there. It's the welcome to the company. It's the email that goes out about you with a photo. It's the first Slack message you get, right? It's the experience of coming into an organization and feeling like you're a part of it. So we call it a new hire experience, but that's exactly what HR creates. And
Mm.
yes, even though I roll my eyes when I say it, we also are the ones who plan the parties, create the functions, those kinds of things as well as part of HR. Not me. I always tell people I was meeting with a new client on Monday and I was explaining my team. And I said, I am a straight shooter. When you call me, I don't BS you. I'm going to tell you how it is. If you screwed up, I'm going to tell you that. If you want somebody to like be your cheerleader or say, oh, sorry you had a bad day, you're going to call Cara on my team because she's the nice one, not me. So when you plan events, there's someone else on my team who will do that for you. But we do that in HR as well. So HR is everything from the minute you get recruited all the way till the day you retire or we kick you out, whichever it is.
Well, I was going to attempt to recap that, but I don't think there's any chance. So our listeners, you guys are just going to have to go back and click rewind if you want the Cliff Notes because there's no way I could keep up. But let's just say there's a lot of stuff that HR does. It's about managing people, it's about managing operations, and that's anything from the strategy to the tactical implementation, your employee handbooks, your documentation, your new hire experience, and then it's also the first person conversations that you get to have too. I mean, you guys are in essence kind of a non accredited therapist, I imagine, in many days of the week too,
People say
which
that all the time.
yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way to either you or the therapist in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's just a byproduct of, I mean,
It
it's
is.
it's a lot like going to your barber or your salon. I mean, you just develop a relationship with those individuals where you're so comfortable and people end up talking about anything and everything. So that's amazing. Um, I want to shift gears for just a second because something I've always admired about you and your approach to others, how you balance systems and structure with empathy and humanity. So I want to zoom in for just a minute. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis when a company is truly people first? And because I know people first is a huge, huge, huge component of your culture, your ethos, like everything that you bring to an organization. So what does it look like on a day-to-day basis when a company is truly people first, not just in words, but in how decisions are made, how teams are led, and also how accountability is held?
Yeah. I stand and live on that. So everyone in HMP believes in people first leadership, people first HR. And so the concept of people first, it sounds so simple and it's so hard. It really is.
Mhm.
It's not easy to do. But the intent is that when you put your people first, they will always put your product, no matter what it is, first.
Mhm.
So a great example is I've worked in senior living communities. I've ran HR for senior living communities, and I have such a love for senior living communities. One, for the amazing people who live in them. If you've never spent time in a senior living community, just walk through them. You'll hear the
Mhm.
greatest stories and meet some of the coolest people you've ever met.
Mhm.
I unfortunately and fortunately worked in senior living communities during the pandemic, which was the most horrific time to be living in a senior living community. And so I felt blessed because we, of course, all had to be on site
Mhm.
because it was required, of course.
Mhm.
But I felt blessed because we were the only people who got to visit with the people in the senior living communities because their families couldn't come in. right? So day to day. And I got to be there to support all of our employees, all of
Mm.
the nurses and the nurses' assistants and the dietary people and the cooks and everything else, right? Because I ran HR for them. But they're the most amazing group of people, but they have such a love for they have such a love for the seniors. But
Yeah.
why?
Mm.
Because we love those employees. My job was to love those employees, to put them first. Whatever they needed, my job was to put them first. And when I put them first, they knew they were loved and cared for, and they put the seniors first, right? So they could have stayed home during the pandemic. They could have put their family first because they didn't have to come to work, right?
Hmm. Right.
But they chose to. They chose to invest back into the organization that invested in them because they knew that they were our top priority. They made that company their top priority. And our product were seniors, right? So it doesn't matter what your product is. It doesn't matter whether it's an airplane part. It doesn't matter whether, it's a computer system. When you put your people first, they will put your product first, and your bottom line goes up.
Mm.
So even though people think, oh my gosh, they have to put your product first at all times. No, because your product is not the end result. Your people are. And so,
Hmm.
what you do to put people first, absolutely, as a leader, all it means is one, you empower them. You give them the tools to do their job and you get the heck out of the way.
Mm.
Let them know that you believe in them. Let them know that they have the power to do their job because if they didn't, you shouldn't have hired them to do it.
Yeah.
And then you allow them to do it. You recognize what they do well. You congratulate them when they fail small. You make sure that you continue to communicate with them and you reward them appropriately for what they do, right? So it's all about investing in them and making sure they know that they have value in your organization. That's what it's about. And when you do that, do you know what you get? You get employees who feel like they own the company. They feel like they have ownership in something, and they're the ones who are going to go through the parking lot and pick up the garbage they see. They're the ones who are going to make sure the lights are turned out when they leave the building, even though they didn't have to. They're the ones who are going to make sure that they have picked up the extra reams of paper that they saw and put them back into the cabinet instead of taking them home at night. They're the ones who are filling the gap, right? Because they feel like they own part of the business because you've given them that ability as a leader. That's what people first leadership means. And I will guarantee your bottom line goes up if you truly do it. I have many companies who've done it and I've watched it happen and they've come back around. I've had companies who had bottom lines that were in the red. And in 2 to 3 years, they have amazing results from it. The company that my husband works for is one of them. We hired him in specifically because they were over $500 or $500,000 negative, and in 2 years, they were over $1 million positive. And it's because of people first leadership. Has
Mm.
everything to do with it. It has to do with empowering your people, and it has to do with how you lead.
That is amazing and so insightful on so many levels because I know as an owner, it is potentially intoxicating. Like it's very easy to get so focused on the business, the financials, the outcomes, the binary that it's not intentional. I don't think most of the time that you start to lose sight of the people that are the actual backbone, the core to the business. I mean, frankly, without them, there would be no business. And it's you really just, I think, largely answered my next question, but I wanted to see if you have anything to expand upon this because where I've seen a lot of leaders struggle is exactly that. Like they want performance, they want retention, but they haven't really created the conditions where people feel safe, they feel seen, and they feel supported. And what I wanted to ask you is what's the first domino that has to fall into place to shift that dynamic? And it sounds like to me the answer to that question is creating that people first culture. And I guess I guess the next best question, maybe anyway, um, for for And maybe you can think of a better way to answer or illustrate this, but if you've got a leader that's, say, older, that's, set in their ways, it's coming from a different generation because leadership, 30 years ago was very different than what it is and is expected today, especially to be successful. If they're still struggling with some of those old dog, new tricks type mentalities, or there's somebody that has the desire but they're just having a hard time conceptualizing, like really understanding, okay, I get why this is important, but I still don't quite see how to initiate those conversations and start building this culture. What would you say to either of those parties? Where do you start?
Yeah, so that's why I would recommend doing training,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
one of the first things that I do is I walk in and I do what I call a foundations training that
Mhm.
I've created specifically for that. And what it does is it teaches you empowerment. It teaches you how to empower your employees, how it's okay to watch them fail, and how
Mhm.
you let go, right? How to put boundaries in place and then step back. It teaches you how to create team. It teaches you what the top 5 things you always teach your employees are, which has to do with health, it has to do with safety, it has to do with team collaboration, etc. Right? And so it really is teaching you how to lead them and let go. It gives you tools, right? And so that's one of my favorite things about it is you create your own leadership toolbox, right? And your first tool is a mirror,
Yeah.
right? And it has physical tools for you to think about, like a mirror. So you always are visualizing it. And the mirror is because as a leader, your people are looking at you for what you do, not what you say, right? So look in the mirror. Are you truly following through on what you're asking from them?
Hmm.
Don't you dare
Yeah.
ask your employees to do something you're not going to do, right? That old mentality, I'm sure every one of us has heard from our parents, don't do what I say, or don't do what I do what I say, right?
Hmm.
I hated my parents for saying that at times, right? You're like, no, you're doing it though, right?
Yeah.
But our leaders do the same thing, right?
Hmm.
They're like, no, you have to stay till 5 o'clock, and they're leaving at 3 o'clock, or or don't you dare like get on Facebook at lunch or whatever, and you're watching them like scrolling through, shopping, halfway through the day or whatever the case may be, right? And those are extremes. They're usually not that extreme,
Hmm.
but most of the time, it's little things leaders don't even realize they're doing. And that's
Really?
the problem. They don't think about what their leadership is doing to other employees, right? It's everything from body language to, like you said earlier, voice inflection.
Hmm.
One of the biggest ones that leaders do that I think drives people nuts and they don't even realize it, and I had to stop myself, which is why I teach a class on it, is this little beautiful thing right here. We have
Okay,
this
tell us more.
we have this tendency when employees come into our office or our space and they say, hey, do you have a minute? Or we call them in for a meeting or a one-on-one, and we have this little pretty thing in our hands. And we're pretending to listen to them as we're on our phone, or we're checking emails and we're not making eye contact. Tell me how many of you feel like you're listened to, right? So it's little, but they're not doing it on purpose. No leader is going, I'm doing this because I want them to feel like they don't have any of my time or attention. No leader is thinking that in that moment. They're thinking, oh my gosh, I have this project that's due. I have this timeline. Someone's waiting to get back to me. They're trying to get as much done as possible, right? But what they're not thinking about in that moment is that employee now feels disrespected. They don't feel like they were listened to. They think that what they had to say was not valuable or important. So nowhere do they feel like they were put first.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
little things like that that are what I train leaders on, new ones and old ones, right? And it doesn't matter. Even someone who's way deep in their career, when you point that out, and I point it out really well, I do it in that I actually mock them. I'll sit there and I'll be like talking to him and I'll ask him a question and then I'll start playing on my phone. I'll be, huh? Did you answer the question? Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Would you answer it again, please? And then I'll go back and I'll do it again. I'll do it a couple times just to see how long it takes them to see what I'm trying to show. Because telling them doesn't mean anything. It's all about showing them the mirror, right?
Hmm.
So that's how I teach them because it's all about them learning their own tricks. Because when you do it that way, it goes back to what you said earlier, Zach. You have to make sure that you approach it in a way that doesn't set them off or make them feel like you're aggressively attacking them.
Hmm.
It's truly about just showing them, right?
Hmm.
And when you use yourself as an example, it makes it a lot easier for them to go, oh, I do that too, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to you're doing that, I say, I do that.
Yeah. I mean, I love so much about this because one, it's attack the problem, not the person, right? And I think that there's a very subtle dividing line between the two. And if I had to differentiate it simply, I think part of it comes down to first identifying your emotion. And there's power in vulnerability. And I don't think people talk enough, and now it's being encouraged more, but talk enough about the way that you felt because of somebody else's action. And now you're speaking to the action, you're not labeling the person. And it creates an opportunity for you guys to dive deeper depending on the emotional intelligence of both people within that party. But I think vulnerability is an overlooked superpower in these environments, that plays a really critical role. If you guys are listening, and there's a really great book from an interview I did a few weeks back, the book's Connection, and they talk a lot about this specific conversation about how to bring vulnerability into all of your relationships, and particularly the workplace. And from what I'm hearing from Heather, this is something that she is leveraging and integrating already. And what I want to point out that you're doing, Heather, that's so unique is you're leading with leadership. Like, you didn't go straight to HR. You could dive in and, oh, we got the handbooks and we have all the stuff that we have to create and the things that we need to do. But you recognize that in order for all of the HR policies, principles, implementations, the strategies, the operational infrastructures, the tactics, for all that stuff to work and for it to stick and for it to have the impact they want, then we have to change the actual psychology of the people implementing it first and build a culture around that HR department. So what you're doing is not like anything that I have ever personally experienced. And I've also been the guy on the other end of the table that, and it wasn't usually my phone, it was usually the thing that I was working on in that moment, and somebody would walk in and there's like this tear. I mean, I knew 50% of me, my left brain's going, you need to be working on this, you got to get this done, you're going to be here till midnight. And the right brain's like, I love this person. All I want to do, I know myself, I'll sit and talk to them for 2 hours. And then I'm in this like internal narrative battle of all the crap that's going on. But when I condition myself to start giving myself permission to stop, put that thing to the side, and really focus on them, you're right. It transformed the organizations. And I bring those same dynamics into the sales teams and the cultures that I help rebuild, at least from those divisions, because it's such a critical part. People need to feel seen, supported, heard, understood, and cared for. I want to turn the spotlight back on you for a moment. You've led HR for some really incredible companies. You've launched your own consultancy and you've helped shape hundreds of workplace cultures. So, what's a personal lesson or maybe a defining moment in your career that changed how you led not just others, but yourself? And I think listeners will really resonate with leadership growth behind the strategy. So, I'd love to hear this.
I have two. I have
Perfect.
one that's
Tell.
positive and one that's negative.
Okay, good. That's perfect. Showcasing
So
vulnerability. I like it.
speaking of vulnerability, my largest learning moment was early in my career. It was my very first HR manager job.
Mm,
I'd done HR as an associate, as a generalist, all of this kind of stuff. And I had went and left the organization I was working at, and I took my first HR manager job. And it was an international company, and it had been in business for 50 years. It was a Canadian and US company, and I walked into the office and I was going to take over the world. And I walked in and I said, "Where are all the HR records and what's going on and all this kind of stuff?" They'd never had HR before, by the way.
mhm.
And so I got one single banker box, 50 years, one single banker box full of like scraps of paper that said things like "Pay Joe $500 on this week payday," right? And I was like, "Okay, where's the rest of it? Like, where's your I-9 forms, blah, blah, blah." And they blankly stared at me because they were all Canadians that were running the US side of the company. And they're like, "I-9?"
Oh my.
Oh, that was me. That was, I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
So I immediately started scrambling to do all this. So then my first brain thought was, "Oh my goodness, they need me so bad. They have no idea what they're doing. This company absolutely needs HR." So that was my mentality. And I walked in and I was going to fix this company up right. And that was my attitude.
Wrecking ball.
I was in charge. I needed to make everybody understand what they needed to do.
Mhm.
And I started doing that. Right. And this is a manufacturing company of very male dominated individuals. And I am a young, like in my mid 20s, female who's storming the castle to tell people what to do. large group of male outside sales guys all over the US and Canada. And here's Heather calling them up to tell them exactly what they're going to do. About a month and a half or so into my job there, I'm taking numbers and names and getting it done. I get called into the CFO's office and he sits me down and I think I'm doing a good job. And he said, Heather, nobody likes you. And I went, I'm sorry, what? And he said, I don't know that this is the right fit for you. And I went, I'm sorry, what? And he said, people are so afraid of you and they do not want to work with you. And I went home in tears, because I thought I was doing a good job.
Yeah.
And I had a really humbling moment that my job was not to tell people what to do. That's not what HR's job is. My job is to support the organization and to provide them a way to buy into what they need so that they can continue to grow and that they can continue to be successful. And if you know me, you know I don't do well apologizing or coming back around. And this is a 20-something-year-old Heather going into a room full of over 50 males and apologizing to them. But I did it. I walked into the next leadership meeting and there are 12 gentlemen sitting around this table. And I walked in and I said, I'm sorry. And it took everything I had, but I did it. And I said, I'm wrong. This is not what my role is. And if you will allow me to try again, I would really like to earn your guys' trust and work with you. I'd like you guys to understand what this role should be. And it was humiliating and it was hard. And it took another almost year to get everyone to build relationships with me again. And that's a lot because I build relationships pretty easy, but I'd broken a lot of trust in it. And it was the hardest thing I learned. But you know what? After that, I attacked every job the same way. My job and my team's job is to provide support to leaders so that the company can grow. Our job is to get rid of all of the roadblocks and make sure they have all the tools so employees are healthy and happy. There's a culture that can continue to thrive and that the business grows, right? So it changed everything in how I led, but it was humiliating. My second one was less than probably 5 years ago, maybe. So it's very recent. And I have had a very successful career, a very long international, flown all over the world, got to do HR in multiple different countries career. And I went to work for the senior living company. And my boss, the CHRO, I was the director of HR, and he said, your first job when you start is to do nothing but have coffee with people and build relationships. I don't want you to do any work. And I went, I'm sorry, what? Because I'm a type A. I'm like here to hit the ground running. And he's like, that's all I want you to do. And so I would go and meet with him every week for my one-on-one. And his first question to me is, how are you feeling today? And it drove me nuts. Like, this isn't about feelings. I have a job to do. This is about results. And he said, no, it's not. You should not have any results. I want to know how you're feeling, who you met, how your relationships are going. And it took me almost a month to actually realize he meant it. Like, I was not supposed to do anything but build relationships. And I did. It took a month and I started to do what he asked me to do. And all I did was develop really good relationships with people. And it mattered. And it mattered for two reasons. One, because I actually had to do a WARN Act and I had to close an entire facility. And if I had not built the relationships, I would have lost all the other facilities. But because I had relationships and trust built with people. So when we closed, I was able to keep all of them there to take care of the people until the end. And I was able to keep the other facilities completely up and running because of the relationships I had built. Two, it changed my leadership again to where I am 100% relational first. And it has impacted everything about how I build the top level in every organization. And so I can walk into an organization and start to immediately have relationships with the C levels and not have them think that I'm there to reprimand them or make them think twice about being open and honest, because that's how I can take broken and help them figure out how to fix it. Because I don't come across as this individual that's there to condemn them for anything they've done wrong. I'm just there
Mhm.
to take it and fix it and help them get better. And so those are my two biggest learning lessons: relationships first, and always come in as a support function.
Yeah. Two really powerful lessons. I mean, I heard ego evolving into humility. And then I heard what I thought was leading as a type A being creating the success that I desired to realizing that the people and the relationships will actually create the success that we desire. So those are really, really powerful takeaways. Now, Heather, as we wrap up today's episode, I'm going to put you on the spot for a moment. I know you're building something really special,
Thank you.
and it's not quite ready yet, but I am super excited to see what you are about to be introducing to the world. In maybe 60 seconds or so, could you give the audience just a little bit of a taste of what you're building behind the scenes, who it's for, and the impact that you are desiring to have with this new creation?
I am so excited, and it's something that is not really out there in the market. So I'm super excited. So, and I can't take all of the credit. My other half actually was the reason that this started out, and I thought he was insane. And then I did a little more thinking and digging into it, and he actually wasn't insane. So we are developing an actual HR toolkit.
Mhm.
And so what it is it's an entire kit of the major HR components that you might need inside of a business that you'd be able to pick up and be able to walk through the steps to keep yourself in compliance, which is number one in every business, no matter your
Mhm.
size. But two, also so that you can do it the right way for the employees, for the leaders, in a way that's going to make sure that you, like Zac said, you have the heart and the empathy in it, as well as the bottom line and the business mind in it. So it has everything from templates in it to how-tos to videos to watch. It's got a little
Live
bit of,
coaching.
it does. Live coaching is in it
Mhm, mhm,
too.
mhm.
So it'll have everything from how to recruit and even job description templates all the way through to the tough conversations to potentially putting someone on a PIP or documentation, which is one of the biggest things leaders struggle with. So super excited, and it'll have an opportunity for you to do community as well. So you can ask other leaders who are going through similar things through it. So we're super excited to be able to launch that. We're
I'm
hoping
super
by the end of
excited
the
for you.
summer it'll be up and running. Yeah.
Well, maybe by the time we'll be close then. Yeah, by the time we get this podcast actually published and launched, our listeners are going to have to keep an eye on the notes as well. I make sure we update the links and get those invites out there. I mean, I love what you're building. I love what you're doing. And I think one thing, I know Heather won't share this, so I'm just going to do it for her and have her expand on it and make it more accurate. But why you guys should trust Heather. She's been an HR professional for over 20 years. She's certified at the highest level for international HR leadership. She speaks like 7 different languages, eidetic memory. I mean, you will not meet a more brilliant human in your life, let alone somebody that has the depth and breadth of experience that she does in HR and leadership teams and development. So when the time comes, if you're a growing organization that needs support with your HR, wants support with your leadership, wants to really look at the intersection between the two, make sure that you guys reach out to Heather and HM Pinnacle because you will not regret the decision. If anything, it's going to become a catalyst, a springboard for creating something even better within your companies. Now, what an incredible conversation today, Heather. I appreciate you. Some big takeaways for me, and there were way too many for me to try and list them all. So I'm going to try and pick some of the big highlights. Like, I love one of the questions that you ask first when you come into a company. And I think every leader listening to this call should ask themselves this question. Walk me through what you think your employees are coming to work for. You got to understand what they want, the impact of the people, and be mindful of the fact that this is going to be different for every generation. So you got to build it around your culture. Um, what is HR? It's a strategic partner at the leadership table, right? Bring the people part of the organization to the operations part and mesh them together. And And what it does, it allows you to invest in your people and make sure they feel valued, feel like they have ownership. And starting with leadership amongst your senior leadership team can be one of the fastest ways to get buy-in and adoption and implementation of the new HR infrastructure that you're going to be building. And then lastly, maybe not last, but make sure you're developing strong relationships with your teams and your people. It's that relationship that people rely on, that safe place where they can come and go and be the authentic version themselves while demonstrating and utilizing their skill sets, their aptitudes, their unconscious competences that make them unique and make them great. And when you build those relationships, you create an environment where everybody can grow together. Now, I hope our listeners are walking away with as many insights as I am about leadership and culture and how we treat our people in the pursuit of growth. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to follow Heather and check out her work at HM Pinnacle Consulting. That's HM Pinnacle Consulting.com. We'll make sure we've got that in the show notes. You can also find Heather on LinkedIn. That's Heather MacKay, Mackay. She's doing powerful work helping organizations scale without losing their soul. And I think we need more of that in today's business landscape. So, as always, if you enjoyed this, please share it with someone who needs to hear it and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform so we can keep the movement growing. Until next time, remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice.